Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something along the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. If you're enjoying the conversation here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you or someone you know would like to come on the show and have a chat with me, feel free to reach out to me on the social media platform that you're on, because I'm probably there too. And the best way to find that is to go to isaac.r11.com. You'll see all the places that I'm at. All right, so with that out of the way, I'm looking forward to this conversation. We were talking about uh, travel and AI and all sorts of good stuff backstage, and I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation. So my guest today is Phil Nash. Phil, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Isaac. Hi, everyone. My name's Nash. I'm a developer relations engineer at IBM. I work mostly on the Langflow project, which is it's an open source drag and drop builder for AI applications. Yeah, I've been IBM's a sort of new thing to me. I'm going to keep saying new for I think until I'm like 6 months into it, but it's like 3 months now since we were bought by IBM as DataStax and Langflow. So it all feels very kind of new and exciting to me. But I'm comfortable and happy working in DevRel on open source at the moment, which is kind of a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk about a lot of things. I have questions about working at a company like DataStax, which I think kind of introduced itself kind of in this AI wave, and then going to kind of a larger company and figuring all that out. But I want to
Mm.
see how you got started. Like, when did you realize that technology was the thing for you? Was it when you were a kid? Was it a little bit early in your life? Do you have a good fun story to tell?
Yeah, it depends on how far back we want to go. Yeah. I remember when I was a kid at school, God, I must have been like 9 or 10, I guess. I think I got some lightly special treatment, I think, where myself and another kid in my class like got to go off to play on a computer, which there weren't many of those around, to play with Logo, the
Oh
little
wow.
turtle drawing
Yeah,
game.
yeah,
If you
yeah.
ever, yeah. So we did. I remember doing that, and that was fun, and learning early loops and things like that. I never saw that going anywhere because it seemed like this just random addition that I was granted, I think, along with this other kid. I don't know how many other students were doing this, but that was my first experience. But I don't know if that stuck. The one that really reminds that I always think back to is I was when I was 13. I was at school. I was 13, yeah, and we did our first HTML page. And I say HTML page because there wasn't. That's old enough to be pre CSS, pre JavaScript. But we built in the computing class when I was 13, year 9 at school. We built an HTML page, and being able to um, write some text and then see something different appear on the screen, I think was the thing that got me really started and into building,
Yeah.
excited about building things. Yeah. Um, I always remember I got very enamored with the color maroon for some reason. And so my page was very just maroon.
Mm.
And then tables at the time, I think you probably still, if you have an unstyled table, if you give it an enormous border, like it's shaded at the bottom and the right, and it's light at the top and the left, so it looks like it's sort of sticking out of the screen
Yeah,
at you.
yeah.
And
It's like a little
that's why,
three-dimensional to an extent, yeah.
exactly. And that's why I've never gone into design because this maroon enormous bordered table monstrosity was the first thing I ever created, and I was very
Sure.
pleased with it. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, that's. I mean, when I started tech, like almost immediately after, and like I was in college, like when MySpace was very, very popular, right? So people would customize their
mm,
MySpace pages,
yeah,
and I just remember like you would go to some MySpace pages and it would like crash the browser because it was just like absolutely awful, like CSS and JavaScript and browsers at the time didn't have like a lot of kind of
no,
constraints. So yeah, it was fun times. But like I think for a lot of people, that was like their first introduction to like, oh, I can actually like design what web pages look like. And I think a lot of people from that, like I remember there being like some very nice looking profile pages. And then some others where it's like,
oh yeah.
butterflies flying across the screen and all sorts of weird stuff, right? Um, but yeah,
I
it's
was,
yeah,
yeah,
good.
I was also in university when this came around. I never actually had my own MySpace page, but I was in a band, and so we had a page for that. And I remember at that point, I was doing a maths and computer science degree, but the computer science was nothing web at all. So I was kind of doing stuff, doing stuff on my own, and like I'd built my own little web pages and things at that point. And so when I got to this MySpace thing, I was like, oh my God, how do I make this actually work and do things nicely? It was horrific. But there was some guides out there, some early blogs on which kind of gave some template stuff. And all I remember from it was like the way to target various sections of the page was just it was all nested tables.
Yeah, yeah,
And different sections I think were like either four or five tables you were in the CSS collector to kind of target it. I just remember being like table, 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 this, and it made a nice border. And things lined up, and that was the thing that most MySpace pages didn't do, which was line
sure.
up or have
Yeah.
any. So yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm
I
very guilty of the tables, and then tables turn to divs with like float right, float left, and like
of course,
and then eventually you get to this point where I think CSS gets it becomes a thing, a tool for experts, right?
yeah,
And I think that's great. I've never really been successful in like making like very aesthetically pleasing websites. That's why like now if you have like an LLM to help you, like a Claude, or or if you're using an
mm,
IDE like Cursor or using GitHub Copilot, like, hey, make this not look like trash. And I mean, sometimes it'll make it look better. Sometimes it'll just make it look just a different version of bad. But I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
Yes, I've had that. I think yeah, there's an amount of um, luck involved in getting some language models or some of those tools to make your things look nice. I think the tools that like are specifically built for those front end things, Lovable and V0 and things like that, are better at that because they have
sure,
some of that like initial styling guidance given to them, so you don't have to know all of that,
yeah.
which is kind of useful.
Yeah, no, those tools are kind of fascinating, and I think we'll talk about this a bit more. But I think, like, also, I think you're going to have substantially more success when you're building things using like a very boilerplate approach, right? Like, if you look at all these tools online, like V0, Bolt, Lovable, whatever, right?
Mm,
They're all kind of building like the same version of an app, right? They're building like a React app, and then they're using something
yeah,
like Supabase or something like that as their backend, and they have integrations to Stripe or whatever. Because the goal obviously is to like target people that are trying to build websites, marketing websites, or websites for their little company thing that needs to like have Stripe integration. And I think that's super
yeah.
valuable. But I mean, if you were to ask it like, "Oh, generate like a Java app that does this," it would probably have a hard time if it
Ooh,
supports
it
Java
wouldn't like
anyway.
that. No.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah, that's it. They're very front end heavy, JavaScript heavy, I guess.
Yeah.
Makes it easier. The more you constrain these things, the more kind of freedom you can kind of give them in a way.
Yeah. So so it sounds to me like a like pretty early on you had decided like I'm gonna work with computers the rest of my life. Like, or was there a point in time in your life where you were like, oh, maybe I'll be a doctor, or maybe I'll be an accountant, or maybe I'll be, based on where you live, like maybe I'll go like, go into the zoo, like zoology sort of course of study, right? I know a lot of people that like animals and have like zoology backgrounds from Australia, which is interesting, but I think anyway, I'll stop ranting. Like, was there another career
No,
field that you were
that's.
thinking about?
Do you know? So I am super indecisive, especially as a child. So I didn't know what I wanted. Uh, I also didn't grow up in Australia. I am here now, but I grew up in the UK, so slight different there. Not as many zoologists, I don't think there
Oh, sure,
necessarily.
sure, sure.
Um, but yeah, so I was super indecisive. Like I was lucky, I was fortunate to be good at school, and I that just let me leave my options open for as long as possible. Um, so like normally, I don't, this is not bragging, but normally like as you get to the final exams, at the age of 18 in the UK, like you tend to do three of them, three different subjects, and I was doing five. Then I went to university. I did a maths and computer science degree. I did kind of, I was like, how do I keep these options open? How do I
Sure.
not make a decision? So I was bad at that. I never knew what I wanted to do. Um, and actually, it turned out like near the end of my degree, I wasn't feeling particularly confident about doing anything in maths or computing because it was hard and I wasn't going very well at it. Talking about
Sure.
getting things to do Java, that almost entirely put me off of computer science because yeah, well, most of the courses at the university that I was doing were based in Java, and I was terrible at it.
Sure.
I hated the compiler. The compiler hated me. Um, and so it was going badly. But again, like on the side, I'd been building little websites. I'd been styling MySpace pages. I'd done some stuff like that. And eventually, kind of as I got to finals and really genuinely should have been seeing and revising rather than playing around in the web, that's kind of what I realized was going to work for me. And so I kind of decided basically just after finishing that I was going to become a front end web developer. That was the thing. Um, and at this point, I was like, I don't have any experience in that, so I need to do something about that. So I cracked open a fresh install of WordPress, uh, made myself a website, and started basically blogging about learning front end web development.
Mm.
Um, and that about I think it was a bit over a year later worked for me, and I got my first job as a front end web dev, which worked out really nicely. And genuinely like writing about that stuff. And this has ended up being a bit more of a theme for the rest of the career. It was like writing about what I was learning and sharing
Sure.
that with other
Yeah.
people, um, based on effectively like reading those blog posts from people who are sharing how to style a MySpace page or how to build a column layout with just floats. That kind of stuff inspired me to start writing about things. And then that kind of got me into, yeah, that first job, probably my second job. And then the third job was in developer relations. So it's been a thing. I've not necessarily been consistent over all that time, but writing about that kind of stuff really helped me into my career. So yeah, I started as a CSS and HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Not a designer,
Yeah.
but I had designers to make things look pretty for me, and I could
Sure.
turn designs into stuff that looked good and beat IE6 in the bug war.
Yeah, I relate to the not very being very good at math thing a lot. Like I
Mm.
remember I got to a very specific point in math in university, and I just realized like I'm not good at math. Like, and
It
I
takes a
think
turn at one point, doesn't it?
yeah, I
And you're
mean
like,
it
ah,
starts
where is
like
this going?
yeah, it starts to get very theoretical and very much
Yeah.
thinking about what numbers could possibly be, and then it to that point I just kind of lost because obviously like discrete math to me like okay how many apples do you have like in the physical world it
Hmm.
that resonates far more to me than any of the other things. And I had a conversation with a professor. I was like, well, am I going to be kind of hamstrung by not continuing in the math place? And it was a crusty old computer science professor, and he was like, well, you need to be very good at math to be good at computer
Ah.
science. And I switched majors kind of because of that.
Oh no.
I switched majors to like information systems, which for people that don't
Okay.
know, it's like computers with business, which is very much like not math oriented. And I think it aligns more to like a lot of the typical work that you see in tech, right? Where it's like I have a business
Mm.
problem and I'm trying to solve it with technology as a tool. Not to say that people in computer science don't get those sort of jobs, but I
Oh
think
no.
there's value in kind of knowing management and accounting and finance and marketing and all of that to like to some degree, and then working at a company that happening to write code, right?
Mm. Yeah, that line about maths being important for coding is it's been such a pervasive, it's not exactly a lie, but it really does pervade the whole thing.
Yeah,
Um, it's useful if you want to do graphics, right?
sure.
And maybe everybody in the 90s in university was like, graphics are the only thing we'll ever need to do on computers, and that's why they were all convinced that we all needed to know maths for it. But it so hasn't been the point for such a long time. If you're not, yeah, if you're not drawing pixels to a screen yourself,
Yeah.
you probably don't have to care. So yeah, absolutely. Like facing up getting the business challenges and that kind of thing more understood is actually far more valuable.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I think too, like there's a level of, I guess, I think a lot of people kind of see how you solve really complex math problems with how you solve complex computer science problems, right? Like, a lot of algorithm work has some math, I guess, historical things to it, right? Um,
Yeah.
but at the end of the
Yeah,
day,
those algorithms haven't changed in
that's my
in the
that's
last
my
30 years.
that's kind of my point, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
using any structured language, right, that's been around for the last 20 years or even the last 10 years, more than
Hmm.
likely you're so far above like, oh, I need to write an algorithm to do a sort or to do a binary tree lookup or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
all those problems have been solved, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, anyway, rant about math and computer science. Let's move on from that. I
Well,
think
that was kind of nice to get into the web
yes,
20
yeah,
years ago or something, because those problems had, well, not the same problems, but there were whole new sets of problems to be solved. So it was kind of a really interesting growing area at that point.
yeah. I feel like the web. I think you and I are of similar ages, so like the web was kind
Mm,
of our introduction to what what is potentially out there, like the possibility of things. You see people make tons of money in the dot com boost. You see the dot com bubble and people go crazy, but then like within 18 months, like all these people and all these companies are still back up making money, right?
mm,
And I think that for
mm.
me, like I recognized pretty quickly that there was like a career in technology and it was going to, good, bad, or indifferent, it was going to pay well. So like when did you
Huh.
realize that like there's money to be made in technology?
Oh wow. I don't know that I did. I just went for it. It was something I
Sure.
was interested in. I don't think I have the business kind of
Mm,
head for that kind of thing. I just found something that looked like it was going to be a job, and and something that I enjoyed doing, and I went after it. I remember at university, and finding something that I wanted to do was really interesting, really
yeah.
important, because I remember there was a university careers afternoon one time in my last year there, and they had four people come in to talk about their careers to the maths department, basically. And so the four people were, I remember this almost vividly. There was an accountant, there was an actuary, there was a
Mm,
teacher, and there was a guy who worked at GCHQ, which is the sort of code breaking wing of the British Secret Service. So it's a bizarre set of people. The accountant kind of basically stood up and said, "Look, it's not that much of a fun job, but we go on all these great team building exercises
sure.
and
Yeah.
go whitewater rafting at the weekends." And the actuary came up and basically said exactly the same thing, which was bizarre. The guy from GCHQ came, I think he went last. The guy from GCHQ came up and basically said, most of you in this room are not good enough to do this job. So, and I spotted a couple of interns from the summer program. Maybe we'll see you back. But apart from that, the rest of you can just forget about it,
Sure.
which was not super inspiring. Um, and finally, the teacher kind of stood up. He's a maths teacher, and he was just like, "Well, I didn't really intend to get into teaching. I just sort of fell into it, and
Mm.
that's where I am now." And so, like, none of that was inspiring,
Yeah,
and
it's
it
not
just
very expiring.
really put me off. Basically, yeah, getting into area at all. Um, it particularly worried me because 2 or 3 weeks later, um, uh, an email went round to a group of people that I was doing maths with, so in a smaller kind of college, came from our tutor, who kind of had this. Somebody had reached out to them to be like, look, we need a maths teacher for the next year. Have any of your graduating students fancy kind of taking on maths? And I'm like, oh no, this is bad. It was particularly bad because um, there was 12 people on this email, and 11 of those people were going on to do a fourth year,
Oh
and I was
wow.
in the end of my third year. And so basically, like the entire world was pointing to accidentally fall into being maths teacher to me, and that guy seemed so sad about kind of just not having a direction that I also hated it. So it all
Yeah.
just looked like, yeah, stuff was going to go accidentally, and so that's when I re-upped and resolved to find something that I actually cared about,
Sure.
rather than, yeah, going after money. I think if I'd have really just gone chasing after money, I'd have tried to get into that accountancy
Sure.
or banking or something, and that would have been very dull and very boring. And it turns out that I lucked into chasing a career that actually was um, quite lucrative
Yeah, yeah.
in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, you said something, and I kind of remember there's like this old adage where it's like those who can't do teach, right? And whenever I
Yes.
hear that, I immediately think of like that's like the biggest like, you know, like that's the biggest misinterpretation of anything. Like, I mean, all the
Oh,
teachers that I
absolutely.
know, people that have kind of dedicated their lives to the entire, like teaching the entire spectrum of individual, like those people have a particular makeup that I'll never have, right?
Mm,
Um, yes, I've done like mentoring, and I've like done some like I was a TA in college for some computer classes, and that was fun. But like to make it like your life, and every day, day in and day out, you see like the pinnacle of success for students and like the pinnacle of defeat for students, right?
mm,
And you kind of have to manage all of that and try to help every kid get to where you think they can be. And for everybody, that's a bit different, right? Which, it's kind
yeah.
of like, in the corporate world, if you kind of akin it to like people management, but, you know, these like the people that you're managing still have a life ahead of them. Not to say people like that are in their career don't have a life ahead of them, but like they're pretty set in stone with like kind of
True.
their eventual outcome, right?
Yeah. And I kind of, yeah. So I look at what I do now, which, for an amount of the time is stand up on stage and teach people about a subject for a half hour and an hour. And I'm like, did I become a teacher accidentally anyway?
Sure, sure.
But I think I think kind of what you said is interesting. Like when you're dealing with every spectrum of children who, for the most part, have a lot of life ahead of them, and you're partially responsible for that. But also, like a bunch of them just don't want to be there either.
Yeah.
Um, it's very different, I think, when you get to take on a room full of developers or professionals who are excited about learning something new or finding a different way to do something. And you're also not responsible for them once you leave that stage or that
Yeah.
room either. Like it's their career. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's their responsibility.
it does take somebody very special to pick that for kids and teaching. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
not to dive like too deep into like the methodology of conference talking or putting together that sort of stuff, but I've always been fascinated with the idea of like who's in the room, right? Because you have
Mm,
people that are like new in career, like kind of what you were saying, new in career, people that maybe they have some familiarity with what you're talking about, maybe they're just curious, and they have people that are like experts, right? And your goal is to kind of have something resonate to the entire spectrum, which is really really hard, right? Especially for a half hour, it's not that challenging because it's just people are wasting an hour of their life if they're not happy, right? But I've always
yes.
struggled with this on like if you're doing a workshop, like the workshop side, because people are committing like 4, 8, 16 hours to something. And I've always kind of questioned, like I've done workshops and there's people that almost know as much as me, or in some cases know more than me. And you run into this situation where it's like you don't want to ask them discreetly, like, why are you here? And like
Yeah, it's a good
and then
point.
you have people that they've never seen the technology ever. Maybe they're like college students, maybe they're working in a particular area of technology and they have to get out because they can't handle it anymore, so they're trying to figure out the next steps are. So like there you kind of have to give them like a preliminary kind of education before you even begin that sort of workshop content, right?
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. Like I've done many more talks than I've done workshops. Uh, and the workshops I've done have been in AI, so it's much more recently.
Yeah,
So it turned out like most of the people in the room don't know,
sure.
which has been useful. So I've not kind of had that, which is nice. The way I for conference talks for to talking from half an hour to an hour on something, I think that's an interesting one because actually at the end of that time, I don't think you're expected to have taught anybody anything new.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but not to say that you shouldn't have shown them new things and it's stuff they wouldn't have seen before, but like no one knows a new subject after watching somebody talk about it for an
Yes.
hour.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's their
Um,
kind of responsibility to kind of take the mantle and kind of learn on their own, right?
yes.
This is just like a way to invigorate or excite people.
Right, it's the job of the speaker to, intrigue somebody, excite somebody about that topic enough that they come back to it. that they'll go and like they'll note that down as something they have to follow up on later, and they've
Mhm.
got a few pointers in the right direction, and they'll that some things will spark in their memory when they start reading about it again. But it's not your job to actually have somebody know something at the end of that talk. It's your job to have somebody care about it. Um, yeah, it's we've done a bunch of talking about university. Like it's one of the things that like after I first started going to like industry conferences and people were entertaining on stage, I was
Yeah,
just like, why don't university lecturers try and entertain people and
that is
engage
a
them?
great question,
Because
Phil. That is a great question. And my honest opinion is that those poor individuals have been ground down by the bureaucracy of working at a
that's
major
probably it.
university. And like I think you you maybe, I don't want to say you lose your sense of wonder, but I think there's also like there's a lot of things that you need to do to make it a college level university class, right?
Oh yeah,
Um, I think that occasionally like on TikTok I'll see like some professors that are kind of funny and I'm like, "Oh, that would be great." Like, people singing in class or like yelling at students that are sleeping or things like that, right? Like you know, I think that's really cool. But at the same time, I think that it would just suck. Like you have
oh
like
yeah,
there's people with expectations that aren't realistic. They're like, we were talking about a bit earlier, like there's people that probably just don't want to be there, but maybe it's an
right.
elective and they have a different thing. Maybe it's because their parents want them to go and they don't even want to go to college. Um, Maybe they're bored in general because every class is too easy. Um, so like I think
Yeah,
you consistently run into, that's why I think you remember like the teachers or the professors that really went above and beyond because so much of
I
that, so
was
many
I,
of them don't.
I was just bringing to mind like there was one guy. It was a computer lecturer. A guy called Richard Bird. I remember his name. He specifically taught the course on procedural programming, which is a weird course to have taken because object oriented had taken off at that point. But we did a course in procedural programming using a programming language called Oberon, which almost no one's ever heard of, which is great. No one's ever used it. But I remember that guy. He actually, funnily enough, I remember his name partially because he also wrote the book on the functional programming course that we did. But he taught this procedural one, and he was just engaging and fun. But I guess he was probably a bit younger, and I guess like computing is an exciting and interesting
Sure.
field in that time. And yeah, you're right. If you've been teaching first year maths for 30 years and it's the first year maths does not change um,
Yeah.
ever, then getting yourself up excited to go and scroll those equations out on a blackboard again is not as exciting as probably the theory you're working on at the time. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I forgive people for that, but it was that one of those. It was interesting to go to like tech events early in my career and see people who, again, not to say that professors at university don't care about what they're doing, but to see people who seemed to care a lot
Sure.
more
Yeah.
about it because they were excited about it was kind of, yeah, I guess fairly inspirational and what I've tried to take into any of my public speaking as well.
Yeah. I mean, you make a very good point. Like in most science, technology, engineering, and math, like in the STEM protocol,
Hmm.
like a lot of it is basically set in stone, right? I
Yeah.
think engineering is the one area that's not because like we're trying to figure out like how to manipulate all the other sciences in order to actually create things. Um, but like I was thinking about this at like one of my favorite courses I ever took in college was like a geology class,
Oh
and
wow.
I remember thinking as like I don't know how much has actually changed in the geology field for a long time, but I like rocks. Like I like seeing different rocks. Like that's an oversimplification of what geology is, I you made a good point. It's like algebra has not changed. Organic chemistry hasn't really changed. Like most introductory physics has not changed. So it's like one of those things that you even add just like if you're a professor and you're teaching these courses every quarter, every semester, every year for 30 years, I don't know how excited you can really be, right? It's like, okay,
It's true.
we're gonna talk about compound compound bonds, right? In chemistry, it's like they've been around for 70 years, so I guess we're just gonna do this again.
Yes. Yeah, we are so fortunate, particularly again in computing and in technology that this stuff moves so fast
Yeah,
that you cannot stand still. Um, Although you still, somebody still has to get out there and teach variables and loops and conditionals.
sure, yeah,
They're not changing too often, but we get a lot more um, change and excitement and hype as well, admittedly,
yeah.
that we get to deal with.
I don't think there's any other industry or kind of job function in modern capitalism that has as much volatility as tech, right? I mean, you think of like, okay, so what is crazy in the banking sector? What is and like does uh, corporate management, does that change drastically over time? And like in the last 3 years, like the entire tech
Mm.
industry has been basically flipped 180 and then 180 again and then 180 again, right?
They're
And I
all doing,
think
yeah.
and I think for people like me who are naturally curious and honestly like have super short attention spans and like are kind of need their brain to be on fire all the time, it matches very, very well for me because
Yes.
if I'm getting bored with something, I just got to look in a different direction. And I'm like, oh, what is that? I don't know what that is. I should go learn that.
And if you're getting bored with anything that's happening right now, you just have to wait a week and it's changed. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because you'll get this joke because you're in the front end world. Like I have a talk on stage that I do, and I'm showing a little bit of Angular, and I make a joke about like, oh, by the since I started doing this talk, like there's been 15 new versions of Angular, right? Um,
Yeah.
and people giggle because they understand how fast some of these things move. And I think one of the things I'm curious about, since you started kind of in the front end space and you were doing stuff in the WordPress world, and then you kind
Mm.
of did you transition into like more proper like front end engineer sort of thing? Did you just naturally go, I like the CSS, HTML, and JavaScript thing. Like I like the immediate result that you get of like changing a couple of things and the website refreshes and it's completely new.
I mean, I continue to always like that. I do. It's it again, yeah. I having done the graphics course in university and the thing which actually required all the maths, I didn't like doing that. I like being like, let's declare some stuff and it appears on the page. I like that. But I started with WordPress only because that's what I put my own website on. My first job was with a proprietary CMS system, which was a ZAR system that had a lot of the database returned XML, and you had to transform it with XSLT onto a page into HTML. That was weird.
Sure.
It built its own version control system into it, which is also odd. But I was doing just front ends for that, which was mad. Didn't last that long there. I actually found a job that I found a place that the job advert basically said, are you a front end engineer or front end developer? We didn't use engineer at the time. Are you a front end developer and want to learn Rails? So it was a Ruby on Rails shop. And I almost didn't apply for it. I genuinely saw this as an advert on a website I was looking at. And I looked at it, that's interesting. But I have a job. But I'd clicked through at this point and I found out that job was a 5-minute walk from my house in London. And no one gets to work
Sign
five
me
minutes
up.
from their
Yeah.
house in London. So I was like, I mean, it wasn't just the location, but maybe that pushed me over the edge to apply for it. But the opportunity to work with open source technology at that point, to work and learn Ruby and Rails, um, was a good opportunity. And so I did apply for that job, and it was glorious working 5 minutes from my house. But it meant I got to continue kind of working on my front end, but also learning a bit more of how the back end worked as
Sure.
well. So I worked my way back through, building views in Rails, and then like changing the controllers to affect what turned out in the views, and then you go from there to work with the models, and then suddenly you're in databases, and
Yep.
and you're a full stack developer, and it was a good time. So that's I got into just I guess the promise of open source and the rise of Rails at the time, because this was I think maybe 2008, something like that. So yeah, it had been around for a while, but it was growing, and it's what everyone was building on at the time, and it was a great place to be.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me how some technologies or programming languages just get a lot of visibility out of nowhere. Like, I think Ruby on Rails is a great example of that. I think they're usually kind of spurred on by like one big app is written in it.
Mm.
Like I think of PHP. Like, oh, like the only reason why PHP exists is because WordPress, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, I think of like Go. Like, oh, Go, the only reason why Go is a thing is because Docker and Kubernetes are written in it, right? Like,
Uh,
yeah, it's like one of those things where a company or a group of individuals decide like, oh, we're going to build this new thing in this programming language or in this
yeah.
system, and for whatever reason it gets mind share, and then everybody's like, oh, well, that programming language is really really good then because it built that thing, right? But then you think about it, like you were mentioning a bit earlier about, you worked at a job and they built like version control and all these things, and it's kind of funny like the hoops that people had to jump through to build things before they kind of existed, right? Like building, distributed systems or
Yeah.
building
Oh,
like plugins and like all these like, oh, we don't really have the frameworks to build these sort of things, but we're gonna do it anyway because we need it.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. And the difficulty with this system that had its own version control built into it was that as they built new features to this, the version control didn't necessarily cover those new features until it did, which almost ruined a release of that I was working. I was working on a fairly big project. There was only two of us working on it, but it was a decent customer. And like I deleted the main page for
Sure.
this entire project like a week before it was supposed to launch, and that was being built on the not Java, not version control system. They built a version of Java Pages JSP into this application as well, like alongside this XSLT transformation thing. And the JSP stuff was a lot more powerful, so we built most of it in that, and then yeah, just deleted it and it was gone. Thankfully, I'd been working on this thing for 3 months or something at this point, and so I was actually able to like rewrite the entire thing in a day because I knew it inside out. But it was it was so just like you're a junior developer in your first job and you've just killed basically an entire project with a
Yes.
week from launch. What do you do? And the
Yeah.
only answer was just rewrite it. It was mad.
Yeah, I mean, you hear these stories all the time. It's like, oh, I dropped the production database, or I did this
Yeah.
thing, right? And it's one of those things where, I mean, I was having this thought the other day. It's like, are we getting far away from that? Where because modern systems are so sophisticated and so complex that like doing something as trivial as like dropping a database table in production, like the opportunities to do that are like very minimal. Like something very bad has to happen for like a junior developer to get to
Yes.
a point where they have some code that executes in production and it doesn't go well. I'm saying that creating bugs and things like that, like edge cases and
Oh
and
no, you
that
can
that's
still do
that
that.
yeah, still do that. But like catastrophic events. It seems today like the biggest issue is like, oh, DNS isn't working, right?
It's
Like
always
and
DNS,
it's
yeah.
always DNS,
It
right?
is. There was the story from a few months ago about the guy who was building a startup on Replit, and he using their vibe coding kind of thing. He
Okay.
was vibe coding it quite specifically, I think. And then and he'd written all sorts of instructions about not dropping the database into his instructions, and then it still dropped the production database, I
Yeah.
think, after it launched. So yeah, you can still do it if you
Oh yeah, I have a
don't know what you're doing, or
yeah.
take your hands off the wheel, I guess, and let an AI do it, or
Oh sure.
give an AI access to your production database. It's a terrible idea.
Oh, for I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, why would you? I've used, I was, using like a coding assistant this morning and just like
Hmm.
try and do the vibe coding thing, and I just got very frustrated because it gets itself like they get themselves in a loop, right? Where
Oh
they
yeah,
they they create something, they don't like the way it looks, it fails a build, and they just keep reiterating, and they just have to click the stop button, right?
yeah,
Um, like I think about my oh no, I did something bad in production story is like I dropped a whole bunch of or I didn't drop them, I deleted a bunch of records from them because
ah,
I had to build a tool or to build a stored procedure that basically like cleaned up. Like we had a tool that like had licenses, and we were like having to clean up licenses. And I wrote this tool. It worked in all the environments, and then it ran in production. It just deleted all the records from the table, right? And we had backups because we were,
Yeah,
whatever. But it was one of those things where,
because you weren't vibe coding it at the
yeah,
time.
yeah, you look at it and you're like, I don't know what happened. Like, I have no justification, and and it's one of those things where you can't test it, like what happened, because testing it potentially brings down the database again,
That's the
right?
thing,
So
yeah.
you're just like, okay, I guess we're just not gonna run this again, and we'll just do it manually, which is a bummer, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
yeah, I think so. You're in this like this front end space for a while, right? And you kind of, I imagine you've been through the point where you've tried like almost every framework that's come out, right? Like, do you remember a point in
oof,
time
almost.
when you kind of you sat back and you're like, man, I've learned so many different ways to build an app with JavaScript. Have you actually thought about this?
Yeah, and I also, uh, I for the most part, like don't build. I'm not responsible for the front end
Yeah,
of a very interactive app
sure.
for anything. And so everything I build, I'm just like, I could have just done this with vanilla. I could just do
Yeah.
this with hanging off event listeners on bits of DOM, and I know how to do that. And it does actually a lot of the time. I find that simpler than having to go through all the setup for all of the any of the frameworks that we have, which bugs me. It makes me feel really old. But you'll find that even some of my example apps that I've written this year will just use vanilla JavaScript to do the things. One of the other things is because if you're doing this with a framework, if you're doing it with React or something, they all have their very specific requirements for how they're used,
Yeah.
which doesn't necessarily line up with like new bits of technology or things like that because it hadn't been considered up until then. Um, I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem necessarily, but so I'm thinking of I built an app earlier this year which uses a lot of the um, this built so Chrome are building AI kind of models, more AI models into the browser itself. It's only stuff available in Chrome, but there's a prompt API, and then some other smaller ones that are more focused, like translations and language detection. And I earlier this year I built like a voice to voice translator between English and Spanish that works entirely in the browser using these models and things like that, which is cool, super cool new stuff. And the entire thing is built using old vanilla
Yeah.
JavaScript because I was like, I don't need to work out how to put React around this. All I need to do is listen to a few events and make this kind of thing happen. So
Oh yeah. I mean,
it's my stuff is always a combination of new and old.
yeah, it's funny because you brought up something, and this is kind of, I'm not going to go into a rant about modern web frameworks, but like, you know, if I need to understand like seven different principles to like write
Yeah,
like a little code, like I just need to update like the text in a div, or I need to, and yes, like React and Angular and Vue and all the other tools that are frameworks that exist, like it's much more complex than just, oh, I need to do some DOM manipulation. But it's always been fascinating to me where it's like, you open up, you create like do like a, create React app, or ng new, create a new Angular project, and it creates like 15 files, and it
yeah,
installs like 150 gigabyte or megabytes of like npm packages, and like you look at the
yes,
website that it creates, and it's like a hello world, like single page, right? um and I understand that that's just the starting point, but I always kind of question where it's like, and this is the best we have, like I and
what do
this
we
like,
lose
yeah,
here? Yeah.
yeah, it's like if I'm getting started in tech, like this is what we have. I'd much rather pick up some other language like Python, which at least to me seems like a bit quicker. But then when you think about Python, it's kind of the same but with a different mask on, right?
Oh, true, yeah. And look, like when I started as front-end developer, building these apps, that there were basically no frameworks. It was jQuery and not kind of a Vue framework or anything. We'd have the entire app would be 1,000 lines of JavaScript, 2,000 lines of JavaScript all in one file. Like
Yeah.
it was horribly organized and like it was hard to debug if you did make a mistake somewhere. Um, so like you do win a lot more out of the current frameworks with that kind of thing, at least organizationally. I mean,
Yeah.
that's when Backbone came in, and that was one of the earlier kind of like, let's actually split things up into different files, and require JS like brought common JS to the front end, at least to the build tools, and you were able to split things up and like make things look simpler. Like that was a big win there. So yeah, so whilst I like to hang on those old things, the fact that nowadays in the front end you can use ES modules to import stuff like easily, and you can split your application up and you can organize it the way you want to, and so like the underlying platform has actually grown as well as our frameworks, and we can't forget that a lot of the platform itself supports what we can do, and the frameworks push the platform. Like it's actually like it's a symbiotic relationship. It's a good thing.
Oh, for sure. And I just, it's always funny to me because when I talk to somebody who actually knows a lot more in this space than I do, I'm always just, it just seems to me, because as somebody that has tried to evade as much front end development as possible, like I've built apps in the front end, but like I think, I felt much more comfortable working in different areas of tech. And uh it's just always funny to me.
That's
You
fair.
like, you see, and I think also too, like there's a little bit of imposter syndrome where it's like you see what some like very very good front end developers or front end engineers can build, and then you kind of like, now I know it's not for me because I can't do that. Like I can't even do like any of that. It reminds me of like I did a, like I mentioned a bit earlier, like I was a TA for a computer science course. It was
Mm.
like a basic web development class, and like one of the like labs was basically like, kind of learn how to do like build like very basic pages like using Dreamweaver. Like this is the point in time when
Oh
Dreamweaver
wow,
came out.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And there was a couple of students that were like, the websites they created were absolutely brilliant. And I had this moment where I'm like, maybe I'm not supposed to be the one teaching these people. But then I realized, like, everybody kind of has their hobbies, and they happen to have hobbies in that space. Like they were very good in Photoshop, they can do things in
Mm.
Illustrator, like they had that sort of design capability. But it just kind of harkens back to kind of the point I made earlier. It's like sometimes you just see somebody do something, and you're like, oh yeah, that's not for me because I can't do that.
Yeah, I have that with any kind of operational deploying things.
I
If
see.
if I'm not pushing something to a Git repo and then it's deploying automatically for me onto, I used to love Heroku for that, but like I guess for Cell and things like that these days. Like if it's not that, I don't know where I am, and like, I assume. People are doing magical things with Kubernetes and doing all that kind of stuff, but that's the stuff I like stay away from. I don't know how to keep a website up if a million people hit it. That's somebody else's job. Um, which
Yeah,
is an easy thing to avoid in the front end, but it's a bit harder when it comes to the back end kind of stuff, I guess. But
yeah, and even in that, like that particular like frame that you're talking about, like that's even like delving into, like, I guess you would say that's more infrastructure focused, which is from a
right, yeah.
developer's perspective, it's like completely like outside of like supposedly the scopes that we should have as developers, right? Like, as a developer, like, do I really care like what, like my heart, like what system my app is hosted in? Like, it should just work, right?
Right,
But,
I
but
don't
now, but
care.
now we're,
And I
but
know
now
some
we're,
people do, yeah.
yeah. But now we have this whole dichotomy where it's like, okay, you kind of need to know like a breadth of the entire tech stack, right?
Hmm.
Which at times is kind of like, it gives me anxiety, right?
It keeps getting bigger.
Yeah. And especially now since we live in this world in AI where, yeah, you can literally say, "Hey, robot, do this thing," and then open up a pull
Hmm.
request and let me review it. And then instead of reviewing it yourself, you can say, "Okay, robot, review this pull request this other robot created." And then also, robot, like, it looks like there's issues here. Fix that thing from this other robot. And you get into this cycle where you're kind of managing like all these different autonomous things
Hmm.
that may or may not have like all the context. And I'd like to kind of end on this conversation about AI with you. It's like, how do we, kind of balance the something that I do as a developer versus something I kick off to 1 to n robots?
How do you balance that? That's a great question. because I think one of the things about this AI stuff is very much that, and you see this all over the place, um, is that that just talking to the general kind of chatbots, they appear to be like incredibly knowledgeable about things. But if you then talk to it about your specialist subject, you pick up the bits where it's going wrong,
Yeah.
only because like you understand that deeply. And so I think it's actually much more beneficial to set the robots off on the things you know how to do,
Mm,
because when you come to review that, you're going to do a good job of reviewing that. If you set it off on something where, and like the sphere of what you know how to do, like I'm kind of talking about if it's coding, then like um, writing code in general is fine. Like I don't necessarily mean like the actual problem you're trying to solve, but the actual like setting off an
yeah.
agent to write some code for you is great. But if I set an agent off to create an infrastructure plan for me, um, I wouldn't necessarily know um, how to
Validate.
read that exactly, right?
Yeah.
Validate it. So um, yeah, so I think it's actually I think with any of these things, we need to always be intentional about our use of the bot of the agent, and that intentionality has to be like either I don't care what the result is. If you are just kind of vibing an application up that's you only need to use once and then throw it away again, it probably doesn't matter what happens there as long as it kind of came up with the right answer for you. If you're building with this, you need to be intentional about like either I know how to review this at the end of it, or I'm trying to learn something so that both I level up and we get this into our application or something. And so those are the things where you should be more hands-on. You should be trying to find out like how this is supposed to work, and still doesn't stop you kind of using agents to help you to achieve that. And we can do that faster now. But knowing whether you're learning something or whether you're confident in your ability to review something
Yeah.
afterwards is super important. That
Yeah.
intentionality is maybe something that that vibe coding doesn't have, but as we move beyond that term, which I think we have in the space of less than a year, really,
Space in like
vibe
3 months.
engineering now.
Yeah, three
I know,
months,
right?
right? Like it, I mean, you make a good point, and it's funny where it's like, you know, yeah, I think there is a valid argument that you shouldn't have an AI do something that you don't know how to do yourself.
Hmm.
But then like you think about it where it's like, okay, well, I really want the AI to do things that I don't know how to do. Like or things that
Yeah.
I am not very good at because it probably knows or could look up from a contextual perspective like what needs to get done that I might not have the time or energy or whatever to do that. But I think there is something to say where it's you can't review code that you've never seen before.
Yeah, if I had an agent build me an app in Rust, for example, like I wouldn't know how to validate whether that was any good or not, whether it was going to run. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Um, but that's not to say that it can't help, right? Like as you said, like it can look things up. Like the more we give these things power to access the internet, the documentation, other sources of information about this, it can surface the things it's used to come up with a result, perhaps. Or, even if it's a coding agent that will just code for you, you could probably ask it for kind of resources on this, or take another agent and ask it for resources on how to learn this so that you can understand it better for this time and next time. And that allows you to, I think, speed up learning these things. That's why I don't think we're ever, the more you can use agents to aid you and assist you on the way to understanding something, the better you'll be. We're not losing something there. Um, but again, I think it's a bit about being intentional about that. And if you don't care about something, I guess you can just kind of go,
Yeah.
yeah. If you don't need to learn that thing, you can just hope for the best. Um, but like not that's not engineering. That's not being a professional, I don't think.
Well, sure, and I think it won't get you very far too. I think that's one of the
Mm,
things that I think is dawning on a lot of people. It's like, yeah, you can have all this stuff done for you, but you won't get like very far.
you're right, yeah.
Like eventually you'll get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm gonna need to touch this. And if you have no like similar to like, I think one of the biggest
Yeah.
things that people question with the LLMs, they don't have context of being a developer, right? They don't know what
Hmm.
it's like. And I think on the flip side, if we don't have context as a developer, what it's like to generate all this code, like how better are we than the robots, right?
Yeah.
Like if we're blindly just accepting things and assuming that they're exactly what we're looking for, and we have to be okay with the opposite of that, where we're not happy with what it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The experience is so important. And it does worry me that like I don't know what it looks like to be a junior developer right now.
Sure.
Coming to this without experience, but also without the same experience that people who've been working it for a while have. Whilst everybody seems to be rushing ahead and just prompting things into building incredible apps, it's a great tear between trying to get your own experience and trying to just get ahead. Um, but yeah, I think using these tools to learn faster is the most important thing there, and using again not just taking a language models at their word or an agent at its word, but using the kind of references that they can bring up as your learning material is super important.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think I totally agree. It's like one of those things where like any tool, you want to take advantage of the tool to make your job a bit more successful, right? Like
Mm,
I very much have been on the drum of it's a developer productivity tool, which means
yeah.
that you use it if it enhances your productivity as a developer, and if it doesn't, you don't use it.
Yeah.
Um, or you
I tell you
use
what
it,
though,
yeah, go ahead.
I would recommend like trying to build something with an LLM as like not the tool that you're building with, but like as part of the application as well. Like if you try and do that, then it makes it much more abundantly clear kind of the limitations of these things.
Yeah.
But also, as you kind of work with it directly, um, unlocking what they're capable of in terms of yeah, calling functions, looking up things on the internet, doing things a lot faster than you can in some
Yeah.
respects, does just kind of it shows you what the difference is between a a plain language model, an agent that you can give tools to, and then actually bending it into the shape of producing the output that you want. Because yeah, without that experience, if you can get that experience building something with a model on top of a model, then I think you'll have a greater respect for every single other agent and model and an application that's kind of built around that out there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And this conversation has been great. Like, it's really nice to talk to somebody that's thinking about these things and
Mm,
they have this context of kind of being in technology for so long and now, trying to figure out the best way to kind of manage all these expectations, right? Because let's be real, as the life of a developer, it's not getting smaller. I think that like it's growing, but our
yeah.
activity is shrinking to an extent, but our knowledge has to be increased. Um, so with that, like again, Phil, I want to thank you for being on the show. And if anybody, wants to follow along with what Phil's doing, like there's tons of places on social media, and I'll put them down below. One place is Blue Sky, so at philna.sh. So philna.sh. I mean, that's about as good as you can get as a domain name for sure. Um,
I absolutely love
yeah.
it.
And this is great. And again, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. Before we sign off, do you have any parting words?
Oh, great question. I want to go off on that last thing that we were talking about. Like, like find what you can build with stuff, but build with LLMs as well, because that is as much the future of development as using them to help you build is, I think. So I'm doing a bunch of that myself. So yeah, please yeah, come follow me on social media, or hopefully I get to see you at an event sometime. And check out Langflow. That's an easy way to go and experiment with this stuff because it is drag and drop. It is still building, but it saves you having to learn all those APIs in the meantime. So check that out. It's free and open source. So go have a look at Langflow.
Yeah, and there'll be a link to Langflow down at the bottom of this as well if you're curious. This has been great. And again, I want to thank you, Phil. I want to thank for the folks that were tuning in live and listening in the future. My name is Isaac Levin, and this has been Coffee and Open Source, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.